Hello overkillers and welcome back to the channel. I want to start out by please asking all of you to consider joining my new channel. It's all things outside of flight simulation. All of my other hobbies, interests, etc. will be posted. It is literally a catch-all for everything else, but you get to see everything that I like doing and all the craziness that I do outside of flight simulation. You guys think I'm goofy inside the flight sim? Wait till you catch me in anything else. Now, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about, once again, this is part 2 of a deep dive for Flight Simulator 2024 following Microsoft's release of a 2024, their own deep dive, if you will. It was an hour-and-a-half video, and I'm doing my best to hit the key points and talk about my thoughts in regard to those. Okay, so today we're going to talk about things like the avionics, as well as terrain and things you're going to have to watch for with the terrain now, as well as new flight models that are going to be available, such as the B2 Spirit. And we're going to get more into why that's now available in this video. As always, there will be chapters down below. If you guys do like this video and find it informative and enjoy the content, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. It certainly helps me out and the channel. And let's get started. There's a lot to talk about. If you are interested in acquiring any of my Overkill's tutorial guides for Microsoft Flight Simulator, or simply interested in supporting the channel, please consider joining us on Patreon. Patreon subscribers level tier 2 and above have access to all of my guides, as well as any future releases that come down the road. Patreon link can be found in the description below.
Overkill simulations, watch us as we fly.
All right, so let's talk about some of the new things that we get to watch out for in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 as it launches in regard to soft body, as well as some other physics that you're going to have to pay attention to when flying. So first thing, things like balloons, air balloons, blimps, things like that. You're actually going to be able to see the inflate, deflate, convection, as well as pressurization of those balloons. Those are all going to be things that are not only visibly seen, but are physically modeled, meaning that the impact of said pressurization or inflation, deflation are actually going to be noticed in the aircraft itself. This is going to create a much more realistic environment for things like the hot air balloon. You know, I remember when Hype launched their hot air balloon. It was a really cool little thing. It was actually a lot of fun to do in VR. It was an experience that I didn't expect to enjoy as much as I did. And so now with this now being fully modeled, I'm kind of curious if they're going to revisit that, if we're going to see other developers revisit that possibility and see what comes with it. You know, is the hot air balloon, I think there is a hot air balloon that's going to be becoming default with one of the packages in Microsoft Flight Simulator in 2024, of course. So, you know, that might be something that really enhances some of the experience. The hot air balloon was really neat in the aspect of sightseeing. Obviously, I mean, you're not going to use it for a commute, you know, but it was really cool in virtual reality. And then so to see that physics and that experience being further implemented inside the sim is going to just further enhance that experience and create a much broader spectrum of community pull for balloon activity and soft body activity. Banners. This one I saw was really cool. So physically simulated realistic drag and flap, and we were talking about some of that in the previous video, and if you guys haven't watched that, I recommend you go check that out. I'll try to remember to put a link down in the description below. There will definitely be a card somewhere in this video. I promise that will pop up on the screen. With all the different aerodynamic effects that are now being implemented in 2024, this is also going to create a much more intense situation. This was one of the areas that I think many of us were concerned about Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 going more towards the game or arcade style versus stepping away from the simulation. And it doesn't sound like that's going to be the case at all. And we'll get more in deep dive in that in the next video. But one of the things that they mentioned that I really was impressed with was it's not going to be a matter of just flying down. So for those of you who don't know how they attach the flag, okay, when you see a Cessna 172 or any of those tow planes towing the big banner across the sky, you know, sign up for Geico, whatever. And be cautious doing that. They're expensive. I have them, but they're expensive. But anyways, they're not just attached to the plane at startup. They actually fly down. There's a hook that they drop that hooks it, and then they pull back up and grab the flag, hopefully. And if not, they have to come around and do it again. So when they say physically simulated and realistic drag, one of the things that you have to take into consideration is you're pulling, what, 100, anywhere from, 50, 60, 70, 100 foot long flag at, anywhere from 12 to 10 feet, 15 feet, high. That's going to create a lot of drag. That's a huge amount of drag, especially when you're first picking it up. If you come down on that and you hook it and you're too slow and underpowered, it's going to slam you right into the ground is essentially what's going to happen. And they talked a little bit about that in the video. So when you grab it, you have to make sure you're at full power. And if you guys watch a real world video of them catching, I've seen a couple on TikTok that I actually thought were really cool. It's actually quite the experience. They come down, very steep angle, obviously. And at the last second, they shove that throttle forward. They pull the yoke back. And if they hook it, they're at max power. It's not a, they go wham, they slam the throttle forward and hopefully hook the flag and grab it off the ground. But you're at max power. Okay, and if you don't do that, what's going to happen is if you just sort of, tool in and hook it because it's just Microsoft Flight Simulator, it's going to grab it, it's going to drag you, you're going to stall and slam into the ground at 100 feet off of it. You know what I mean? So again, like I was saying in the previous video, the physics and things that they are adding to the simulator, I imagine 95% of all of this stuff you'll be able to disable and you'll be able to set your difficulty levels as desired. But if you're running at max simulation that like I'm going to do, and I'm sure many of you are going to do, again, if anything, they've made it more challenging, significantly more challenging. Going back for a second to the previous video one more time, you're going to have things like turbulence take into effect, a wind shear is going to be fully modeled, wake turbulence, other aircraft, taking off and landing. You're gonna have to pay attention to that. There's gonna be a lot. And based on, I had a question in the previous video in the comments, someone was talking about, I wonder how hurricanes, tornadoes, things like that, if they stay on track with what we're seeing so far, and we'll talk more about weather and things like that in the last video, but if they stay on track the way things are, it's gonna be intense. Now, hurricanes and tornadoes, I'm sure, are going to be something that's going to be much harder to visually model. It's going to require a lot of graphical intensity. If you think about just what it takes to graphically portray accurately a tornado, that's a lot. That's a lot. Parachutes, same thing. Going more back into that soft body physics, you're going to have that same kind of simulation. The Cirrus, for example, has a parachute built into it for any reason you lost power, which for me, it's like one of those things like, would you want to fly a plane that needs a parachute to land it, not to stop it? We're not talking about a drag chute. I'm like, what I really want to get into a plane from a developer that is so confident in their aircraft that they put a parachute on it. And I'm just kidding, of course, guys. A lot of people say, no, that's for, weenies, whatever. I've heard a lot of negativity in regard to the Cirrus aircraft. But, honestly, yeah, I would prefer to have a parachute. It's either parachute or trust my gliding capability. I'll go with the parachute. Anyway, we might try the gliding first, but if that doesn't work, I like the idea that I have a parachute. So those are going to be accurately modeled now. Everything from the deployment to the way that they unfold, the accuracy of the wind and how the wind's going to impact that parachute. All those things are going to be fully modeled. So really, really major difference. And then finally, the pitot flags. Pitot flags are now going to give accurate direction of the wind. So you're no longer going to have to be watching for the windsock and things like that. Your pitot flag is going to tell you everything that you need to know. And that also means that the pitot interpretation of the weather force is going to be changing inside the cockpit, especially with inside of the avionics. So those are going to be really, really nice. They're really making some very serious adjustments to that. So I'm stoked for that. Now, what we were talking about earlier is complex shapes are now supported. So that's going to be things like the delta wing, the V wing, double fuselage is things, again, going back to that delta wing or flying wings, being the B-2 Spirit. You're going to have a lot of different shapes and configurations that are now supported. VTOL aircraft. There's all kinds of configurations now that are supported where weren't officially supported in the previous versions of Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, one of the things that I'm actually kind of stoked about is these all look like very reasonable aircraft that we would see inside the sim. So I'm pretty stoked about that. The B2 Spirit, I think, could be a fun one. I'd rather see it in DCS World, but, that would definitely be an awesome one to fly. Real quick side note, I think the B2 Spirit flight computer makes something like 1 million flight corrections per second. My understanding is without the flight computers, it really could not fly. That's insanity to me. Could you imagine your flight control surface is 1 million corrections per second? That's just insanity to me. It's either per second or per minute, but either way, that's ridiculous. Per second sounds like a bit much. But anyway, so that's going to open up the doors to many other aircraft that haven't been what they had the capability to be inside the sim, or much less if they were able to be in the sim at all and accurately fly. These kind of things and the ability to support the different shapes of aircraft is so much more than beyond just planes, but also increase the performance of the flight models that already exist in the sim. That means that the aerodynamics, once again, and the way that the aerodynamics and the overall environment is impacting the surfaces of the aircraft is now being that much more what's the word I'm looking for? It's that much more further developed than what it was before. And that's a big deal to me, because that means that even your simple aircraft, again, going back to the Cessna 172, is going to fly completely different than what we're used to, because these kind of shapes wouldn't be supported if that environmental detail wasn't there. So the environmental, it all comes back to the detail of how the environment is going to be impacting the aircraft. Now, obviously, the coding and the ability to tell the sim, hey, this behavior should be X, Y, Z when this happens is probably more of what they're in line with. But that tells me that with that fundamental basis being there, that every aircraft we fly is going to be completely different than what we've seen before. So again, supporting that they aren't actually jumping into that gaming world like many of us feared. Many of us feared that they were turning Microsoft 2024 into a game, and it sounds like it's going the complete opposite direction, and I'm really, really excited for it now. This was another one that was very, very exciting to me. So they have improved and added new features to system modeling, but not only system modeling, but things like wear and tear. So let's start breaking this down: electrical, pneumatic, fuel, hydraulic system, seatbelt system. Seatbelt system, I'm kind of curious what that means. They didn't really go into detail about that, at least not that I saw, and I hope I didn't overlook it. I was taking notes like a madman, so I might have missed that. The wear and tear system, payload, and passenger system. So let's talk about some of that. So obviously electrical, pneumatic system, and the fuel system, hydraulics, all of those are going to be much more deeply modeled, giving developers more opportunity to further enhance the realistic nature of their aircraft and modeling everything from failures to just basic functionality, circuit breakers, things like that, further increasing the need for, as a pilot, for you to pay attention to your aircraft and what it is doing, especially when it comes to whether it be just fuel management or fuel failure. Okay, that's kind of one of those, just an example. So those I'm obviously very excited for. Again, it opens up the door for a much more detailed flight sim experience, but the ones that really caught my attention were wear and tear. This opens up the door, and again, I'm kind of curious what that's going to look like, but maintenance. You're actually going to have to make sure that you are truly pre-flighting your aircraft. Again, I'm sure that this is going to be something that's going to be able to be enabled or disabled, but me, again, planning on running full simulation, it's going to require me, and I have a bad habit of it sometimes where I just don't feel like doing it, of just saying, I'm just going to jump in the plane and fly. Well, if I'm running on full simulation and I'm not actually, monitoring my aircraft and doing my walkarounds and paying attention to the pre-flight and the checklists, I'm going to find myself in sticky situations, which I'm sure you guys are going to enjoy. Some of you are going to say you're an idiot. Some of you are going to laugh your faces off. And others are just going to sit there and go, as the train wrecks, So I guess, overkill simulations for a reason. I don't always play it by the book. A lot of times I fly it like I stole it, and I'm going to pay the price for that. And so, lessons will be learned. So I'm really excited about that. I think wear and tear is an important factor of it, of flight simulation. And I know it's something that's becoming more and more prevalent as developers are given access to more and more features, and that time is taken to really implement that. I think Black Square is the one that has gotten me the most, with A2A following right behind it. But Black Square's TBM 850 has gotten me more than once already, with bad circuit breakers or wear and tear, etc., engine failures, me not taking the time to start the engine correctly. It has gotten me more than once. So, again, that train crashing that we were talking about. So I'm excited about it. It's one of those things that forces you. And again, starting in November is when I finally get to start my my pilot training. So, it's anything that's going to help me generate the habit. And it sounds like 2024 is coming for me at just the right time. So I'm really excited about that. Payload and passenger system. There are times, like for example, when you are flying a Cessna 172, especially the lighter aircraft, whereas on the longer flights, as fuel burn starts to happen, weight change happens in the aircraft, where you as a passenger may be asked to switch sides, for example, based on your weight, and the way that your weight is distributed. Me talking. I remember there was one time when I was flying in a Cessna 172 where I had to change seats. I had to shift from the right side of the aircraft to the left. I was the only one in the back seat. And I was asked to scoot to the other side. And that is now being modeled. Payload, if your cargo is imbalanced, unbalanced, is if your payload is out of balance, you could actually, unfortunately, and this is not meant to be humorous at all, suffer a tragedy. For example, there was a 747 years and years ago. This was a real world experience that was taken off, and what they believe is that the cargo that was improperly secured down to the aircraft. It was a freighter, and on takeoff, the cargo shifted all the way to the back of the plane. It was a gross weight shift. So it wasn't just like one or two things. It was a massive weight shift because that cargo wasn't properly secured, or a latch broke, something like that. Some mechanical failure took place. I don't remember if it was ever determined to be anyone's fault or if it was mechanical failure, but the weight shifted to the back of the 747, caused it to go very, very nose high attitude, and of course, being just off of takeoff, stalled, and the aircraft crashed, and unfortunately, everybody was lost who was on board. It was a very tragic experience, very awful, and this was seconds after takeoff. And that kind of situation will actually be modeled in the simulator. If you're now, obviously, the mechanical failure, I imagine will be. I don't think that in a simulator that they would simulate something like that. That was a very tragic experience. But that is something that you will have to pay attention to when your cargo is loaded. Is you're going to have to make sure that your aircraft is actually balanced. Or when you go to take off, you may not have the failure, but if you're already taken off with a lot of aft weight, you could find yourself in a stall situation because you're struggling to get that nose back down to where it belongs. So payload and passenger balancing is something that you're going to have to pay attention to. Again, further enhancing the need as a pilot for you to truly take those pre-flight steps and make sure that your aircraft is actually ready to fly. And that's great. That's a huge thing. Now, some of that already exists. I know that you can set your CG, your center of gravity, to be way off, and yes, it will impact it, but I don't think it's to the extremity that they were mentioning here in the video today. It seemed much more of a requirement and something that you definitely had to pay attention to, and that weight can shift during flight. Especially with the fuel management and passenger management. So I'm kind of curious to see what that's going to look like implemented, but it's definitely something that got my attention. I thought was really cool. All right, so now we're going to start talking about real world operations, everything from flight planning to the pilot experience. And that's why I titled this video as such, the experience as a pilot. It's going to be quite intense. And unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be this case in the beginning. But I'm going to tell you right now that based on what I'm seeing so far, 2024 has the ability to be the killer for a lot of third-party companies. It potentially could absolutely wipe out NeoFly, which I love and appreciate NeoFly. I use it to this day. I think it is absolutely the best career add-on for Flight Simulator 2020. I think it could do some very serious damage to Navigraph. Not necessarily remove it because it's still using X-Plane and P3D and again in 2020 for those who can stay with it. But it's definitely going to remove a lot of need for it. And we're going to see a lot of that here in just a second as to why. But so let's start talking about the flight planning experience. The in-game flight planner, as you guys can see here, first off, some key points right out of the gate. It integrates directly with the aircraft itself. So, and we're going to talk about how and that in just a minute. So you can edit your flight plan with inside the aircraft avionics or with a universal flight tab that's going to be available in the aircraft that we'll talk about again in a minute. But it has a lot of the same features that you would find in Navigraph and very, very detailed. So let's go ahead and play this short clip here. We got a couple of them here that we're going to get through. You can see here they're selecting a quick destination and a quick departure location. Aircraft or the world map zooms in. I think they're flying from the Grand Canyon over to Vegas in this one, but watch the way they do it. It's really done very, very well. So you have your band, you have your total distance, you can see all of your different waypoints, so your nav points are there, and then you can just simply drag and drop and create your waypoints as you wish. For example, if you don't want to go over the mountain range, let's say you have a flight or altitude restriction, or you just want to take a scenic route. Okay, very, very nicely done. Then what we have here is all of your runway information. All of the same thing that, so they really took the Navigraph Charts app and took it to a whole new level. It's very, very cleanly done, very nicely laid up, but there's our Navigraph charts, the Jepson charts that we're always, this is probably the biggest benefit. Let's back that up for a second. Damn it. This is probably the biggest benefit to Navigraph charts is the charts. But look at everything that you have, all the data that we would normally use is all here. Everything from your runway, parking assignments, your aprons. I mean, they have the full chart list. It is very effective. And even look at the date. The date range is correct. Now, obviously, this was obviously recorded prior to the release session, so that makes sense. But the fact that they're using the accurate charts for the time period is a huge deal. And again, everything that I've seen just in their short clips is a Navigraph killer. So that's really critical. And like, I'm starting to wonder, are we going to need Navigraph? One of the questions that came up in the previous video, someone had commented about this flight planning tool, was things like Beyond ATC and their compatibility with it. I know the developer from Beyond ATC, and I can tell you right now that I could absolutely see him saying that we don't necessarily need SimBrief anymore. And integrating this directly with the sim. Like the speculation, I have not heard that from his mouth, but knowing the guy and the type of person he is, I can almost guarantee he's going to make this compatible with Beyond ATC. And I would probably say the same thing for, say, Intentions. I imagine they're going to do the same thing. Like, if it's in the sim, why would you want to go third party? You know, why add an extra step? But I don't know. I mean, we'll see. The thing about SimBrief 2 is it's free. Now, you don't get the updated AirAC cycles unless you have the Navigraph subscription, but you never know. We'll see what happens. That's just speculation. But they've really done a fantastic job. So we're looking at here, so this is more of a, like you said, the flight planning advanced features here. But there's your cost index. Okay, higher the cost index, the more expensive the flight for the operator, but the faster the flight. Okay, we see that. Your climb profiles, cruise profiles, your descent profiles, flight details, payload, fuel, extended ops. So that's ETOPS, oceanic flights. Everything, it's all there, man. It's all there. The one thing that I would like to see, but I'm sure it's there based on the information that we're seeing here, is the SIDS and stars. But if they have access to the charts, I can't imagine why the SIDS and stars wouldn't be there too. So, I mean, it would be silly to assume that that's not there. They don't actually show it. I didn't see it in the video, but you can bet your money it's there. You can set your own profiles for altitude. This is huge. This is really big. And again, the fact that it can all integrate directly down into the cockpit itself, which again, we'll see in just a minute, that's a game changer, man. So as we discussed a minute ago, this is the universal flight tablet that comes with all of the Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 aircraft. we're going to talk about the avionics that are there, but obviously they still have the G1000 NXI, the G3 Touch, the G3000. There's a couple new ones that, or one new one that's specifically coming, two new ones actually that are specifically coming to the simulator. By the way, Working Title is who is responsible for all of the avionics and systems in the aircraft with 2024. So you guys know Working Titles work. Like they are on par. They keep it realistic. They change the game for avionics. Everything, starting with the G1000, going to the G3000 and up, they changed it all in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. I mean, when they came in, the rules changed. And so now they are directly involved with the development of the avionics system for 2024. So with those avionics systems that were mentioned, you have the Universal Flight Tablet that can integrate directly as they do. They stated, this kind of technology exists in the real world today, where you will have a tablet where either A, we can import our flight plan from the tablet down to the avionics, or from the avionics up into the tablet. And if you make changes on either one, you have the ability to swap it back and forth to update the respective systems. So this is pretty slick. And all the same information that we saw on the previous screen about how to create your flight plan, so you can do it all directly from the cockpit. The next piece of simulation update that they're doing here with Working Title is killing it, man. They are simulating the real world use of satellites. As you guys, I would assume, all know, GPS, Global Positioning System, uses satellites in space to determine your position. Your distance from said satellites determines the signal strength. Signal strength determines GPS accuracy. Navigation degradation, navigation features. The higher the strength, the more the options. The lesser the strength, the more degradation, the weaker the GPS may be, if it's even available at all. Now, I don't think there's very many spaces in the world that are not available, but I'm sure there are a few that exist. I would imagine around the poles isn't particularly fun, but, hard to say. But check this out. This is really cool what they're doing here. So these are all of the respective satellites that are in the current view of the GPS system based on where we're at. And now you can see here is the GPS signal strength. Okay, so it uses multiple satellites at any given time to, ascertain the aircraft's position. Watch as they're simulating here, as that signal changes, the strength changes, and navigation can either degrade or improve. Like, they've done a fantastic job. Look at this. And you can see the signaling change. You can see location change. What satellite it's using changes. I mean, this is really slick. This is awesome. And so we're actually going to see true navigation degradation based on your position. And with that, you're going to see, again, degradation in features and degradation in navigation capability, which I'm kind of curious how far down that will go, and if it will require us to start thinking about things outside of GPS. I think in 2020, we've become so dependent on GPS that maybe there will become a situation where we have to start paying attention to, mentally, Are we paying attention up here to where we are, or are we just relying on the screen? But do you actually know where you are as a pilot as we're flying around in the simulator? And that's going to change the game. That's going to require you to think more outside the box of simulation and truly start acting, thinking, behaving as a pilot. This is really, really a phenomenal change. All right, so now let's get into the avionics and what Working Title has brought to the table, and Working Title along with, obviously, Microsoft Flight Simulator and Asobo. So obviously we're going to have everything from the pre-flight checklist to the pre-flight walkarounds, all that stuff that we've already known about, but they've really taken it to a whole nother level. We talked about the Universal Flight Tablet integration. I think that's an absolutely slick thing to do, and I'm hoping that it's going to be something that's more open source, that gives developers the opportunity to take advantage of it and leverage the Universal EFB without necessarily having to custom code their own, but maybe add to it. It's going to be interesting to see how that works. Like, for example, certain aircraft that use a tablet for, your chocks, your wheels, all those things. Is that still going to be something that's a necessity, A, because of the walk around capability? Or is that going to be something that they can leverage what's already here? So I really hope that they've opened the doors to the Universal Flight Tablet and allow third-party developers to leverage what's there to control the aircraft. You know, I think that would aid in the development of aircraft to make it simpler to migrate aircraft from 2020 to 24. And then I think two, it's going to enhance the creation of new aircraft, thus restricting, you know, taking one more piece out of the equation, something being able to leverage something that's already there and just adding features to it. I think that would be a really, really slick thing if they were able to do that. So anyway, obviously you have the same avionics suite that we'd expect from working title, you know, having all of your pneumatic and hydraulic systems and flight control systems that are now fully modeled or modeled at a much higher fidelity than what we've seen previously. So again, impressing upon that need as a pilot, as a sim pilot, to really follow through with your steps. Talked about the satellite simulation. I still think that's too cool. Talked about the avionics suites that are available. Obviously, as we talked about before, we have the G1000 NXI, the G3000, the G3X Touch, but we also have the Collins Pro Line 21, which we know is in the CJ4 and more higher class business jets. This is the cool one, and I'm really hoping SimWorks Studios is excited about this one because this is the Primus Epic 2, which is, again, found in more of the upper class aircraft. An example being the Pilatus PC-12. This is one of the newest glass cockpits available on the market, and it'd be really cool to see this implemented into the PC-12. Now, I'm not a big glass cockpit fan. You guys know I like the more nostalgic aircraft, but that doesn't mean that it's not very awesome to see that the capability is there and it's being leveraged at a higher fidelity level, right? That's what's cool to me, is the fact that it's still impressing upon the change of the world. It's like me as next month as I go into my pilot's training, I'll be shocked if I don't. I know that, you know, the training schools that are out here at Tucson International, they have multiple 172s with the 1000 in them. So it's going to be something that I'm going to have to be ready for, right? I think there's a couple G5s in it, but, you know, which I prefer, but I'm sure the 1000 is going to be in my life. You know what I mean? So I wish I'd make it as far as the PC-12, but probably not. And then finally, they're also going to have the Universal UNS-1. This is a real-world avionics suite that's designed for older aircraft. What it does is gives you the flight management capability in aircraft that weren't necessarily designed to accept it. So when you have your more traditional cockpits, your glass cockpit or your analog cockpits that I prefer, with some of the older avionics systems in them, this gives you the ability to have their flight management computer where you're still leverage the features that are available in today's flying while not necessarily upgrading the entire avionics suite, right? So again, this is going to be another thing that I think a lot of developers are going to be able to leverage and add to their aircraft. From what the video said, or the interview or the release said, it sounds like this kind of system is more aimed at aircraft that are back in like the 80s and 90s build era. So seriously, bringing some really awesome functionality to some of the older aircraft. I'm pretty stoked about it. I think they've really done something amazing here. Avionics suites, Boeing 737 MAX 8 is coming with 2024. I'm kind of curious about this one, and I'm wondering if this is why PMDG has, if they're still going to continue with theirs or if they're going to see where they're going with it. Because as you guys know, the INI or any builds 737 is on pre-release. It's on early access, guys, so you guys can actually pick that up right now for 2020. And so I'm kind of curious what that's going to lead us with other developers who might be developing the Max. But you have this class cockpit. This one's I'm excited for. We have the 787 and the 747-8i with, as you guys can see, the glass cockpit suites in them as well. So a much updated aircraft. Speaking of an updated and new aircraft, and speaking of the development of the 787, you have the Dreamlifter. The Dreamlifter was designed specifically to carry parts for the 787. So this is now in the sim in 2024. I'll probably fly it once, honestly. I think it's too goofy for me. Now, it's not just used for 787 travel. It's a very large cargo aircraft. So you could probably use it for just about whatever you want. And I'm sure that the career mode, which we'll talk about here in a second, continuing on with the pilot's life, is going to include the Dreamlifter at some point. But they've really done a lot. There's going to be a ton of things that are going to be significantly different than what we've been used to thus far. I mean, they're really changing the sim. I was very skeptical about 24 for quite a while. I was on the fence. I think it's hard when you don't see the information in front of your face like we're seeing now. And this is This is a big deal. I'm really glad that I watched the press release, and I highly recommend you guys check it out too. It's very awesome. It's just a long one. It's an hour and a half long. All right, so now we're going to get into what they've deemed as their aviation activities. So what can we do inside of 2024? And I'm going to call this the life of a pilot in 24. Right? So if we start moving through here, they really took a lot of customer feedback and tried to make it into a progressive, dynamic, and ever-changing system that keeps you interested and keeps you active in the simulator. Microsoft 2020 saw 15 million subscribers to the software, with over 1 billion flights taken. Like that's a hard number to wrap your head around. With that kind of pull, I think 2024 is going to decimate it. Now that I know what I know now and I'm seeing what I'm seeing now, I'm still expecting bugs. I'm still expecting things to be a pain in the butt at first. It's just the nature of the game and the nature of the beast. And I think that it being cloud-based is going to change a few things too and cause some headaches, but there's still that aspect of it. But what they're doing here is really going to change things. So let's start getting into that. First off, let's look at what we have here. It's choose your pilot lifestyle, true to real world aviation. These are just some of the abilities that you will have inside of the simulator. There are currently 16 different professions that you can take inside the simulator. And he said at the moment, meaning obviously opening up the doors to further expansion. Same thing with the missions. And we're going to talk about the missions and how to select one and how they work as well. Again, a very fluid and dynamic system. So I'm going to tell you guys right now, my top ones: search and rescue. I'm all about mountain rescue. I'm going to be all about aerial firefighting, hands down. There is no and if or buts. I'm going to be all over that. Like, that is super exciting. I'm really hoping that it's what I'm wanting to be. And then crop dusting. I think crop dusting is cool. Aerial construction, that could be another one. I'm like, I'm gonna give it a shot. It'd definitely be interesting, but those are the ones that really have my attention. Then, of course, with some of the aircraft, the VIP charter service would be cool too. You know, that's where my TBM is going to come into play and things like that. So, but those are the big ones for me. Those are the ones. Leave a comment down below which missions you guys think that you guys are going to be jumping on the most. So, starting the career, it's very. This part I think is. I think the menu layout and the overall theme of what they went with is what caused so many of us to be worried about them moving to a more game platform versus a simulator. I will say that the UI that they chose and the interaction looks very gamey, very cartoony. I know what they're doing, and that's totally fine. It's totally cool. As long as the experience isn't like that, which it's very clearly not the way that they've broken this down. We have quite a few slides to go through. But I think that's where a lot of this came from. This looks very... Here it comes. This looks very Xbox, right? Again, it makes sense. By the way, I just noticed a hat. Guys, if you guys are interested in a hat, make sure that you guys check the links down below or above the description. Check out some Overkill merch. You know, pick up some merch. Join the Overkill team. Anyway, I don't know why. I just saw my logo. I wanted to say that. So again, like sort of like this, it looks very cartoony. I can see where they're going with it. And again, in a way, they're using this, I think, to capture pilots of all ages, shapes, and sizes. And that's really, in my opinion, that is still a good thing. You know, I have been into aviation since I was a young boy, knee-high to a grasshopper. Every weekend, I grew up with 3 older sisters and no brothers. It was just my dad and I on the weekends. The girls would go out shopping, doing their things. Dad and I would stay home and watch Memphis Belle and Top Gun and The Hunt for Red October, like all these, Mill movies. The movie Always, John Goodman and Richard Dreyfuss, fantastic movie, by the way. PBYs and A26s outside, right? So anyway, as a young boy, and this is a good way to capture that, right? So I get what they're doing here. So it does look a little gamey, but the procedural aspect of it is dead on the money. So you have your certification, specialization, mission options as you move yourself through. You have a reputation level you have to follow and work on. So if you fly like a you-know-what, that reputation is going to go down, and I'm sure that's going to impact overall scores, missions, credits. And the credits we'll talk about. Credits is money, right? Here are those 16 different specializations we talked about: ferry flight, flight seeing, skydive, aviation, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so moving on down through the list, you obviously work your way through. The free flight or first flight is you as a new pilot. You can fly yourself, go with your friends, blah, blah, blah. And as you get more experience, then you can start getting into some of the other stuff, right? You can pick. The one thing that I do like, to back up a couple here, your scenery and your avatars and the avatars of your trainers will also change, and the name of them will also change wherever you are in the world. And if you are starting your career in Japan, your flight instructor isn't going to look like someone who's over here at Tucson International. You know, they're going to look like they're from Japan. They're going to be, named as if they are from Japan. Speaking of, now we're on to, oh, I never even knew the name. Ultra Paradise. By the way, this is in the same day. So this is what happens. Anyway, I'm telling you, Monster, reach out to me. I'll make you a fortune. Anyway, so, and you can start out with start your training in helicopter training, or you can start with fixed wing, as you can in the real world. Now it's time to select a mission. The cool thing about these missions, first off, I want to talk about is they change every day. So if this one here is someone who, I love the example that they use, is someone who needs a search and rescue who's stranded on a mountain. Well, he's not going to wait for you until tomorrow. So tomorrow, that mission is going to be something completely different and going to be in a completely different location. So they are time sensitive, but it sounds like they rotate on the daily. And that gets back into that dynamic, ever-changing environment. You don't have to worry about that you're going to get the same mission over and over and over again. And once you've done all the missions in a region, then, you're just bored. That's not how that works. The missions, as you zoom in closer and closer, become more and more popular. You get more and more information, more detail, and decide how you want to do this. Zooming out on a global scale, here's all the missions in North America. You get a few that you can choose from here. But again, as you zoom down into a specific location, say New York City, those missions are going to expand and you're going to have even more. And again, changing on the daily. So a very dynamic, very easy to use system. And again, this reminds me very much, I'm going to say it. I think they took a couple cards from NeoFly, but, and this is why I think it could be a NeoFly killer. I really do. I think it could be a couple of different career add-on killers. This may kill career add-ons. It really might, at least for 2024 specifically. Obviously, you're still going to have your 2020 pilots and your X-Plane pilots like that, but it may kill it for 24. So an example here is this is a banner mission. Gives you the route, gives you what you need to do. You still start up cold and dark like you normally would. You still walk out to your aircraft. You still have to do your walk-arounds, remove your chocks, do all your safety checks, things like that. You can start up an engine, as they pointed out in the video, with your pitot cover on, but if you do, you're not going to have any airspeed indication. And then you have to fly within the parameters that are given to you. You have to make sure you can absolutely damage the banner. If you throw it drop it into the trees, well, then you're going to damage the banner and you're going to lose points, lose money, right? You have to maintain your airspeed. You have to make sure that you're hitting everything on the right numbers. And then finally, you get your final score grade and you get your money at the end. Money is then used for certifications. You have to spend money on it. You have to go through your training. So they want you to pay attention to your trainings because you do have to pass the certifications. Now, I'm going to say it here, just like they said in the video. I would hope that this would be a no-brainer, but we know that the world we live in, this should never be used for real-world operation. No, they're not teaching you how to fly a real 737. Yes, you have to go answer questions and do your tutorials and make sure you pay attention, pass your certification that costs you in-game money. No, do not try to go and fly a real 737. That will end badly for you. Okay? All right. Glad we got that out of the way. It's crazy. Even on my guides, I have to put, on my Patreon guides, this is meant for flight simulation use only. And I literally have to put that to cover my tail. And again, you level up just like anything else. So it's a consistent progression. It's ever changing. The missions are ever changing. You can use your money to buy more aircraft. You can have an expanded fleet that's worldwide. One thing they didn't mention, and I'm kind of curious if they're going to implement this, is the idea of owning your own company. Even in American Truck Simulator, for example, or NeoFly, staying on NeoFly for a second, you can hire AI pilots, right? Now, obviously, when you use your own aircraft, because in the beginning stages, you're going to be renting an aircraft, or the initial missions, you're not going to own your own plane, so you're not going to make as much money because you're using their plane, right? You're just hired as a pilot to fly XYZ. And then later on, you can purchase your own plane. Obviously, then you're going to get more money. But then when you start getting multiple aircraft, I hope they give you some way to hire AI pilots, maybe something that's not necessarily in the beginning of the simulator, but something that maybe can get added on later on, and that would further enhance the career aspect of it to developing into a full bore company, right? And then finally, moving into challenges. They will have weekly challenges. This example is as a world photographer. You have to go to certain POIs, points of interest, take photographs, but those photographs have restrictions. They have to be under very specific parameters, right angles. You may have to have, again, an example they point out here was the Golden Gate Bridge with the financial district behind it. You may have a shot where, hey, we would like a picture of the bridge with the moon behind it. There's all kinds of parameters that you may have to match up in order to truly catch the photo, but then you go into your photo mode and you take a picture. So you have the San Francisco financial district is the example they use here at night with the moon in the frame. So those are the three parameters you have to hit to get the most stars in the ratings. So that's one of the challenges. The challenges are going to change every week. There's 3 different challenges. Some of them, there's one that's, like this example was photography. There's some that are obviously landing challenges, flight challenges. There's various different challenges that will change on a weekly basis year round. So they've really done a lot with the aspect of a pilot's life. The walk-around feature is absolutely phenomenal. The pre-flight requirements, the checklist requirements, the experience requirements, the exams. The exams is the one thing that sort of put me on the fence, and not for me. I'm all about it. I want to become a pilot. So the closer I get and the more in the habit I get of absorbing that information, like for me, I want it. Like give it all to me. Give it to me. But I hope that, again, that's something that maybe can be nerfed or reduced for people who maybe don't want to go that deep into it, but they're still looking for that progression. It's hard to say. I guess, and like I said, for me, I like it. I'm just trying to think of it as on a level that maybe, other pilots may not. Right? So getting to the last part of a pilot's life is one of the things that I did want to talk about at a change is the terrain. Right now, you could probably find any flat level grass level-ish field, and you could put, the A320 down on it, and the sim isn't going to care. Now you're actually going to have to. If you want to land in a field, even if you're flying a STOL aircraft or a Bush plane, you're going to want to actually survey your landing zone. Are there any potholes? Are there any rocks? Things like that, because the terrain is actually going to be impactful now and modeled on a 3-dimensional scale. Same thing with water. The waves, the same thing. The waves are going to do the exact same thing. You're going to have to pay attention if you're landing a seaplane now to wave direction, wind direction, wave intensity. If you try to land on a truly busy ocean, it's going to screw you up. You're going to have a bad day. And same thing landing on the terrain. If you land on a terrain that's doing this, no plane's going to come out of that okay. So they've really done an amazing job, and the changes that are going to be coming are just absolutely phenomenal. Like, I couldn't be more excited for November than I think this is the most excited I've ever been for flight simulation. The careers, the missions, the training, it's going to be intense. It's going to be very busy in the simulator, and this is just on launch. Just like anything else, 2024 is going to expand. It's going to constantly be ever changing. Flight simulation is never a static thing. There's always something new coming out, new hardware, new software. It's really phenomenal. So this was part 2, guys, of the flight simulation experience for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. I have one more video that's going to be coming, giving you guys my thoughts and breakdown of the features that are coming. And please comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to subscribe to my other channel if you guys want to see what else I do outside of flight simming and watch me be a dork. I'd appreciate it. It definitely helps me out. Anyways, as always, guys, stay safe and healthy. Keep the blue up top, and I'll see you in the next one.